Hey everybody, welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to show you some work I've been doing on the air inlet vents from my Citroen DS. Now these two inlet vents sit just behind the front bumper and the air comes in through these to the heating and ventilation systems. This one's in really good shape, it's not bad for a 50-year-old car. This one here unfortunately is not in such good shape, and I've already drilled out the spot welds that hold the separate pieces together so I can strip it down. And what I've found is that the top piece is not too bad. It's got a hole in, but it's not too bad. I can probably plate this to get it fixed. The middle piece is not so good. So the middle section is completely rusted out, and there's absolutely no way I can repair this. It's going to have to be remade. So that's the subject of today's video. I'm going to show you how to make one of these. The third piece, the bottom piece, is in good shape, and all I need to do that is to clean it up, repaint it and reassemble it with the other two components. But I am slightly ahead of you here because I've already made the replacement, which is here. So this is the replacement inner skin, and in my video today I'll show you how I did that. Here's the two air intakes I showed you with the broken intake on the right. And this is how the broken intake looked when I stripped it open. Stripped it a bit further, and these are the three skin sections I found. The left section is the one I've got to remake as there's just not enough metal to repair. This is the metal I use. It's called Zinc, and it's mild steel with a zinc coating. It's far more resistant to rust than mild steel, so it's perfect for an inner skin section. This is my first attempt. I thought I'd start by forming the cylindrical part, as that was probably the hardest. I found the diameter I needed was the same as a grease can, so taped two grease cans together and formed a sheet of Zinc around the cans. Here you can see the original part laid over the top of my new piece. Unfortunately, I overestimated my ability to do this and quickly realised there was no way I could form the metal into a convincing shape requiring complex curves and angles. So I had to rethink and come up with a plan B. This was to make the new section from separate components and weld them together. Here's how I plan to split the sections with the top cover, two sides and a semi-cylindrical piece at the bottom. I started by making the top cover first. You can see I've cut a sheet of Zinc, laid it on top of the original part and formed it to the radius of the original inlet. Here's the top plate clamped inside the original top cover of the intake to check fit. And now I'm planning to make the right hand sidewall. This is a curve formed from a single sheet of Zinc. To join this sidewall to my top plate, I need to fold over a fixing flange and weld the two plates together. Here you can see I've slotted the metal so I can do that. This forms a series of tabs which can be individually folded down. That enables me to keep the radius but also to have a fixing flange. This is the two parts clamped together. I've tack welded them at both ends so the clamps can be removed. Tack welding is where you just weld a spot to hold your work together in position. If you find they aren't positioned correctly, you can grind off the tack weld, reposition and then tack weld again. But in this case the positioning was good, so I've now welded the remaining tabs to the top plate. I'll have clamped each one of these together while doing that, as two metal surfaces must always be in close contact when welding or the metal will burn away. Here's the original skin next to my new one, and you can see on the original there's a small return flange turned up. This is to give the top more strength. I've allowed enough material on my new top skin to do that and have folded that up so it just needs cutting to size now. This is that job finished with the small return formed. It'll make the new top cover stronger. The next piece I'm making is the left hand side. I started by setting up my metal folder and putting a gentle fold in the sheet I cut. Here's that section clamped into the top cover of the intake with the other parts. The fold I made runs along the arrowed line. Now I'm going to form the return that fits under here and forms a fixing flange. And here that is done. At this point you can see the two sheets of metal overlap, causing a small gap, so I plan to fix that. And I've done it by joggling the edge. This creates a step in the edge of my new side which will tuck underneath the top plate. I have a hand tool to joggle the edge, so just work down the edge of the sheet with that. That gives a nice snug fit where the two pieces join. Now I'm going to fix the new side plate to the top plate. The two parts are clamped together, then tack welded to hold them in position. And here I've seam welded along the joint. This is a view of the assembled intake so far, looking pretty good. Next I'm going to make the final plate, which is the semi-cylinder where the air exits through a tube into the ventilation system on the car. You may remember from my plan A that the grease cans did a pretty good job of forming that shape. So I've taken a sheet of Zintek and formed it around the cans as before, but this time we'll just use a short section as the outlet. I've test fitted that with the other components and drawn the join line on the new piece in pencil. The second line gives me a little extra length to create a joggled edge which will tuck inside the other parts of the intake skin. To get a good joint around this radius, I've once again slotted this edge, but this time I've joggled the metal so it will tuck underneath the top and sides. That was then tack welded in place. Here I've drawn a line on the side of the new piece so I can cut it to the correct height. And this is now an inside view after the cut of the four pieces joined together. Also seen from the outside. And here's that assembly clamped to the original bottom part of the air intake. This fits pretty well, so I'll push ahead to complete the inner skin. On the original inner skin there was a captive nut. A captive nut is a nut that can slide up and down inside a housing to enable some adjustment. The housing wasn't in bad shape, but the metal it was attached to had rusted away completely. I'll make a new housing to weld back to the top plate. I started by cutting a rectangular metal and slotting it to create a cage and fixing tabs. Here I'm forming the side to the cage and the tabs by hand, which now look like this. And this is the captive nut which will sit inside the cage. That looks fine. Here the fixing tabs have been trimmed to size and I've marked up the elongated hole in the top. I started making that by drilling 2 holes. And now I've opened those out and cut out the metal between them with a Dremel grinder. Beneath the cage and the top cover there's a matching slot that I've marked up ready to cut. But just before I do that I'm going to weld these 2 seams. This inner skin is part of an air intake, so it would be great to seal it up as much as possible. I'm planning to weld along this joint and also to weld up the slots. If you've ever tried welding, you'll know it's not possible to weld to a slot because you can only weld to metal, and there's no metal in a slot or hole. The method I use is to build the weld out gradually from the edge until the slots have been filled. You can see the general idea here, though it does take a little practice to avoid blowing bigger holes in the metal. Here you can see I've done that and the slots are all now sealed. I need this surface to be smooth to fit inside the original top cover, so I've ground those welds down with an angle grinder. Now I'm going to do the same with this edge and have welded across the tabs. I just need to finish this by extending those welds across the slots. Last job to finish sealing the top is to seam weld across this joint. And to keep the cover smooth, all of these new welds will be ground down. You can see these 3 joints have all been ground down now. Now I'm in the spray shop, which happens to be my garage. I'm going to paint the top cover and the cage with weld through primer, so I've hung these up ready for painting. Here's the primer I used, though any make will be fine. A weld through primer protects the metal but still conducts electricity, so the parts can still be welded together after painting. This is now the painted intake skin with the nut added, the cage sitting over the top, and then the outer top cover fitted over that. With the parts assembled, the cage is clamped to the top and welded in place. The welds needed to be ground down a bit to allow clearance to the surface of the top cover. And here's the top cover fitted onto the finished inner skin. And finally, I'll revisit my starting point and replace the rusty inner skin with my new part. So, here's a finished item. It's, as I said in the video, it's been painted. It's got its captive bolt in the top, which is the fixing for the wing. So it's all ready to go. All I need to do now is to repair the top cover and then fasten these three back together by drilling and welding them, and I'll cover that in a separate video. If you like watching this, and if you like watching these kind of restoration items, keep an eye on my channel, Ask Stuart, and I'll see you back again.